What's really eating our food isn't us. And the upper three connects to higher divine energy. So technically, it's the higher chakras that allows you to hear divine wisdom. I haven't been to a doctor in like 10 years. I don't believe in insurance. But you're like, I can hear God. Yeah, but what did God tell you to go do this? Why aren't you doing it? Because in this culture, the problem is we like big breasts. Same thing with men. What do we have? Testicular and penis problems. Why? Because we love bigger is better in this country. When they're like, would you donate your sperm? It put me into the space of, am I fertile enough to donate? The motivation of health for men should be different than just, I want to look buff and tough so I can have girls. This is a common misnomer about exercise and health. If we want to talk about cancer and trigger people, I think the number one issue of cancer is we are in Texas. We're not in California.
Yeah. Oh, man. Where guns are legal.
Exactly.
Okay. Welcome back to Holistic Habitat, a place where I support you, or where we support you in your holistic journey, where mind, body, and spirit work together for that permanent, or should I say that desirable change that you are looking for. All right. So today we have Dr. Oh, yeah. You like that. Dr. Charlie. Dr. Charlie. He is an acupuncture. Can I say acupuncture?
Yeah, acupuncturist.
Okay. And I would also consider you an astrologist.
Mm-hmm.
He knows a lot about the body, the mind, the spirit. And this is why I wanted him to be on here, because he has a different perspective in the human body and how to lose weight. And we'll also tackle other things that other people are afraid to tackle. And I know Dr. Charlie is not scared or fear of them. They. Mainstream. All right. However, if I do get canceled, I'm sorry, Mom.
We're not getting canceled. If anything, I think people are hungry for information.
Good. Okay. Well, welcome back, my friend.
Thank you.
It's good to see you. I think it's been, 2 years?
Yeah, about 2 years.
2 years?
Yeah.
Also, congratulations. You're now a doctor.
Thank you.
Why is it that you decided to go to this path of being an acupuncturist, learning about the astrology? Why is that?
So this is a branched out answer, because there's multiple reasons I chose these different modalities. But specifically, if we're talking acupuncture, and we're talking to people who understand the mind, body, spirit, acupuncture was a spiritual connection with me. I met someone, we were just hanging out with a whole bunch of us, and then she just started seeing spirits. And she felt comfortable enough to tell me, hey, do you know that you have an ancestor following you? He happens to look like a guy with a Fu Manchu and old beard, like full-on white beard, like a kung fu master. But he's an acupuncturist and Chinese medicine. And I was sitting there going, I do have a great-great-grandfather in Vietnam who was an exorcist. He worked with clearing out a lot of our curses. However, I don't think that he was an acupuncturist. Now, on my mom's side, there could have been an acupuncturist. However, I believe that my ancestors were trying to reach me. So, and I had just moved to Houston at the time, 5 years ago. So I decided, hey, the spirits and the alignment are showing up where everything was turning out. I was coming back home. My dad's really old now. He's over 80, and he needed someone there. I'm the only son. So as a male figure, I kind of have to I've been away from my family for almost 20 years in Los Angeles. And so I decided to kind of move back home. And the universe was like, hey, you don't have to pay for rent, so you should go into school. And I was like, I don't want to go back to school. And they're like, before acupuncture, you would. I'm like, maybe. So I decided to go in it. And about a year into it, I really appreciated learning what my traditional medicine is. I mean, I'm Asian heritage, come from Vietnam, China, Tibet. And this is our medicine, right? Versus at the time, we are Asians. That means the trope of all Asians go to doctors is a thing in our family. So half of my family are doctors, Western doctors. But I did not want to go to Western doctors because I understood we won't go into Western medicine yet. So at the time I was like, okay, I'm willing to go into Eastern medicine. And about a year and a half, when I finally went into clinic and I started to see people being needled, everything in me felt like home. And so this is one of those situations where like I didn't know I was supposed to go through this life learning acupuncture, but when my guides told me to go, and it wasn't even my guy who talked to me, he talked to somebody else. So I went into it, and now I realized it was always meant for me, but as my personal self, I wouldn't have chosen it. So it just shows how important it is for us to communicate with our spirit guides, with whatever version we call that. I mean, for me right now, I consider them to be different versions of myself working out in different parallel lives, and they talk to me. And so this older version of me said, hey, you're an acupuncturist and a Chinese doctor, Asian Eastern doctor. So I graduated now, and the ancestral lineage of understanding this medicine has really really integrated in myself. This is why I decided to call myself a doctor. I struggled for months not calling myself a doctor because what we consider a doctor today is a Western doctor, and I was already very upset at where Western medicine had gone. So I haven't been to a doctor in like 10 years. I don't believe in insurance. I've been going full on just believing my own way of healing and following my own, lifestyle changes, eating habits, working out. And so because of that, like the Eastern tradition brought me into understanding how my internal organs work and how they support our emotions, our physical health. And that's kind of why I'm an Eastern traditional doctor, but I do moonlight as an astrologer. And so before I came into acupuncture, I was making video games, virtual reality games out of LA, because I had just did a stint in Disney for a few years, and I left Disney and wanted to go into virtual reality games, but I did not want to make any gun games, right? Because we were training people who shoot guns, which we have a gun issues in this day, mental health gun issue, not just a gun issue. And so I made an astrology game. I made an astrology game that would teach people about who they are. But that didn't go well because the VR space was too early. Even today, it's still too early. $4,000 for Vision Pro on the Mac, it's still way too expensive. Only nerds are buying that stuff. And because like the astrology space is very much a feminine space too. A lot of women love astrology. So right now, being now in astrology, and I also learned pranic healing, Reiki, or pranic healing is kind of like Reiki, it's kind of like Qigong, right? Accessing the chi that is radiating out of our body. And so that's kind of where the story ends today, where under these three modalities that are very robust, I want to medicalize them to make it much more accessible, because science is too far behind. They're just finding out things that like we have known by the ancients for so long, but because they have the tools today, they can say that, oh, it exists. Why would we live in a world where we have to wait for science to catch up to who we are divinely, right? So the goal is really to show that there is a robust way to show that scientifically we can repeat a lot of these fundamental protocols and treatments for people who are having these A, Bs, and Cs, right? And so we'll go deeper into that conversation, but that's my my kind of like short story, that acupuncture is the physical representation of medicine. Astrology is the mental and spiritual, and Reiki, pranic healing is the spiritual embodiment of that healing modality.
That's a long answer.
yeah. But it's also the bio, so I decided to just put it all in.
Yes. Now that people know you, I actually have a question. How are you so damn sensitive to all of that? Because, you said that you were able to feel the people that guide you. How are you able to be so sensitive to that?
Definitely in astrology, but so the idea when we talk about spirituality, we have then to talk about reincarnation. Mm-hmm. And when you have that reincarnation conversation, then there's different levels of people who have reincarnated. This is why you meet some kids and they're like, wow, that's an old soul talking to that kid, right? So I've had that. I've always had that growing up. I actually didn't have many friends my age. All my friends were teachers and adults. And so I've always been very sensitive to just wisdom, right? And then So for the longest part of my life, coming to America was very difficult because um, I was attacked for being different.
Mm.
Yet it wasn't like I could stop being sensitive, because I was already sensitive to things, including the energetics, things. I'm pretty clairvoyant, but I always thought that was just my imagination, as the Western culture likes to call it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've always been sensitive to things, but I didn't know what it was called. And so about 2012, when a lot of people had the spiritual awakening, I also had my spiritual awakening, where it was more like nothing turned on. I was just suddenly willing to listen to myself more deeply, because I was already very intuitive, but I wasn't following my intuition for doing something in my life. I was just saying, oh, I'm doing this, and the universe will confirm it. Okay, I should do this because intuitively I feel called to do that. But it wasn't until the last couple of years where I've gone deeper into my healing. I've done plant ceremonies, whether it's ayahuasca, cannabis, or mushrooms, or wachuma, which is San Pedro.
Mm-hmm.
All these, really what they do is allow you to have this deeper conversation with your inner voice. That inner voice that all of us eventually forget about, because we think that your family, your parents, your friends are telling you what you should be. And so when I started to tune into this voice was the most, like, it was reflecting who I was, who I am. And so because of that, I started to realize, like, why do I keep ignoring this voice, where this voice knows me more than anybody else that I meet? And so because of that, in the last couple of years, I really just decided to 100% trust this inner voice. And this is actually what I practice teaching also in my own YouTube channel, is self-healing. Mm-hmm. How do you self-heal? Where you have a voice that is you, that is divine. And people call it the God voice, the higher self, whatever they like to call it. It's this inner voice that knows you for who you are, but can only be heard when you're actually not listening to anybody else, but what's happening inside of you. So I've done a lot of meditation practices. Vipassana retreats are supposed to be that allows you to talk to yourself, to become more sensitive to that inner voice. So for me, the inner voice was there, but it was actually the energetic of feeling the people through these invisible ideas. Mm-hmm. I used to do Aikido, and one of the things that they practice with us is, as soon as you do this practice, you have to sit down in lotus position, and then send out your energetic field. And then if someone goes into the energetic field, you tell them to stop and see where they are, to see whether or not they actually walked into your field. So they taught us how to practice using these people call it sixth sense. I mean, in martial arts, people would say, oh, you have like a murderous intent. I can tell you, and I can call you out because I can feel that, right? And so there's this sixth sense that happens when you work out a lot, or when you use your physical body, that it creates a magnetic field. So today, in physics, this is actually the electromagnetic frequency our body creates. Our body is electricity, but it creates a magnetic field. And that magnetic field, if you're tuning into that, is actually feeding you information. Mm-hmm. So that's what I call my sensitivity, is based on this magnetic field. People call it an aura. People call it the cosmic egg. There's so many names for it, but really it's just this magnetic field that is coming out of you. So I've practiced it enough where now I can trust it rather than trust my mind. Like my heart is connected to this magnetic field, but our mind loves to make up shit sometimes. And because of that, we get caught up in like, should I do this or this? Well, my heart already knows. My heart knew that I was going to come to Houston 2 weeks before my head decided to go back to Houston. Mm-hmm. Right, so that was like the beginning of actually me recognizing that my mind and heart weren't in sync. So today I practice very much as many practices as I can to make sure that my heart is speaking first, and my head is only listening to my heart and giving options.
And that's exactly what I was gonna say next, is the whole like mind and heart, or mind and body, how it's disconnected when you start to listen or what your friends want you to do. And then you get into that people-pleasing archetype, whatever that is. And then, of course, you lose the connection, and you actually get lost, and you don't even know what to believe. And then all of a sudden, it's been 10 years living in this lie, and something had to happen for you to be awakened again.
Right.
I have a couple of friends that are in that state, in a crisis, they would call it a crisis. I think it takes a lot of courage for someone to listen to themselves and do exactly what you're doing.
It's actually really funny. Even in today's society, Eastern medicine is not looked at as a legit medicine. So even in my family, Mom, I love you, but she doesn't trust that I can make money in this space, right? Which is fine, but I didn't really come in and say, hey, I'm going to make a ton of money being an Eastern medicine doctor. Like, actually, for me, it was an ancestral thing. My ancestors have been carrying this wisdom, and I'm the only one who's able to express it. And to me, like in our Eastern tradition, our ancestors represent who we are. Everything that they've done, we are and we have access to. And then you probably heard even social media, they're talking about this. When you heal part of yourself, you're actually healing the lineage 7 generations after you and before you. Right? And that's really epigenetics, the idea that your DNA is always unfolding, software programming. And when you change perceptions or feelings in your own body and you heal, you're actually changing genetics in yourself and in your past lives. And so that's really important because a lot of times what really the problem of today in this country is that we are a hodgepodge of many cultures. Ironically, there's no one dominant culture, yet the Western, what I call corporate infrastructure, is what we call the dominant structure. And that, I think, is what we call Stockholm Syndrome, right? When I came to this country, I was so different that they attacked me for being different. So for a long time, I tried to act like every other American kid. And then you grow up and realize, like, the food doesn't match, so I get sick. Yeah. The medicine they give me doesn't match, so I get sick. You know, all these things that our genetics evolved to were being attacked by different foods, by different way of thinking. You know, everything is a Western concept of like me. Where we grew up in the East, it's we. You know, like as a community, we do things together. You know, and so what happens is we come here as Asian Americans, and we are separated from our family and our heritage. Don't be Asian, Charlie. Don't look Asian, Charlie, because people make fun of you. And so I grew up, if anything, being attacked for being different. So today, you know, I've spent the last, 30 years healing that. So today when people are like, Charlie, are you not afraid that you look different than everybody else? I'm like, are you kidding me? I've been healing that for 30 years. I remember when people are like, aren't you afraid that you're the only one not wearing a mask and everyone's wearing a mask? I go, I was an Asian kid growing up in Oklahoma, white town. I already felt that for a long time. So not wearing a mask is not going to deter me for doing what I believe. Right. And I think ironically now this idea of canceling is because people are so afraid of what they don't understand that they rather cancel it and not see it. Yet here we are, like people love cultures. People either love Eastern tradition. So many white people have followed Buddhism. So many people are doing yoga today, and yoga is not Eastern. I mean, it's not Indian religion. It's just Indian practices. Yeah. And so what's really funny is as Americans, we're actually picking up these cultures, but yet we grew up attacking all these cultures growing up. So I'm in a way trying to take back what was lost to my heritage and now just being like an American speaking out about it, right? Because Americans love to speak up and share their opinion, where before as Asian Americans, we're taught to shut up and just follow the flow.
I see. And I can see how Americans can overshadow that because we're so used to speaking out.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. They teach us to always speak louder, talk louder than everybody. Bigger is better in this country, right? Yet ironically, here we are with like obesity. Bigger is not better, right? Actually, what's happening to Americans today is they haven't learned how to create moderation. And because in our own practice, everything's moderation, right? And so what's happened today is in this city, just alone in this city, we have buffets. Buffets do not practice moderation, right? And because of that, people are overindulging. And that's why we have the overindulgence in weight, because people are overindulging in food. So it's ironic that now I'm here teaching moderation, which is a lost skill. So I think there's a lot of these ancient traditions, not just from the East. I think even from your culture, right? If you are of the Central American, South Americans, which were the Native Americans, the indigenous people also lost their traditions, right? Because the culture came in and said, this is what you eat now. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of us have lost our connection. So I feel like there is a strong, a lot of spiritual energy of our ancestors are showing up in a lot of people's lives. And those who have the ability to listen are listening, and we are trying to express it now. Mm-hmm. So that's how I feel like even just choosing to wear Asian traditional clothing, I was very nervous about it. But like when my ancestors tells me, who do you think is going to look Asian? The white people, the black people, the Hispanics that wear your clothes, or you who look Asian wearing your clothes? So that's kind of why it's right now it's a practice in being myself without being afraid that my own Asian people won't appreciate it. Because I know in Asian, like even when I go to Asian stores, they look at me, they go, oh, is there like some festival that you're wearing this clothing for? And I tell them, no, this is everyday clothing now for me.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, why would you be wearing Asian clothing right now? And that's a disassociation for my own people too.
Wow. So they're going too far right, like too extreme, right?
Stockholm syndrome,
right?
Yes.
Getting lost, perhaps.
Exactly.
From what has helped them in the past.
Not even help them. That's just who we are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like we didn't say, hey, let's be Asian and wear this. Mm-hmm. Actually, we grew up wearing that. Mm-hmm. So today, if anything, like I know many Asians who feel ashamed to wear our traditional outfits.
Well, I think you've healed it because now you're doing it here on.
Yes. Thank you.
So another thing you talked about was the whole like buffet stuff. You're right on that. Like we're extremists, and I wonder why people get to the point that they want to fulfill themselves with food. For me, it might be trying because their life doesn't fulfill them. That could be one thing, right? That they have to seek food for comfort. And do you think we have a lot of that going on here in the United States?
Yeah, so let's go back to the mind body, and we never talked about the spirit. So I actually believe that we have three brains. Mm-hmm. We have the gut brain, heart brain, because there are neurons in the heart, everybody, and then there's our brain, right? Western culture likes to believe that our brain is the most important thing. Yet, ironically, the Egyptians never stored our brain. It threw that away. It stored our heart, but it never kept the brain. And then we haven't really talked about gut health. Yeah. And gut health is actually what's really eating our food isn't us. It's the parasites, the probiotics, the biotics, the bacteria in our gut that's actually eating. Mm-hmm. So if you look at that, I think this country has a problem that it has a lot of parasites. Mm-hmm. And I think it's the parasites that are controlling our gut on what it wants to eat. And this is why we talk about an alkaline diet versus an acidic diet. Mm-hmm. And these parasites like acidic diet because just like mold or just like these parasites like these acidity. Mm-hmm. And so our country has been dealing with processed food. And processed food is like good food to these parasites. And we have never talked about parasite cleansing in this country. Yet, ironically, every culture, I mean, because if you come from what's supposedly a third world country, there's parasites. Parasites are a very common problem that you have in these countries because maybe the water is not clean. So then you drink water and you have a parasite. So we had a lot of food that we would eat commonly that would actually release these parasites. Mm-hmm. And so in this country, because we have processed food, we don't have certain foods that actually clean out these parasites. So I do believe that a lot of us are filled with an insurgency of parasites that have taken over our gut health that is controlling our stomachs to want to eat unhealthy foods and not to. Basically, that's a modern addiction is that. And that's also, I think, because deep down, as a gut health is healthier, then you go into your heart health. And then your heart health you go into your mind health, which is connected to spirituality and this inspiration. And so what's happened is a lot of us are also empty inside. Because of COVID, you can see how deeply we become alone again. very lonely. We, for some reason, have become socially retarded, actually. It's really interesting. And because of that, we have an empty heart. So because we have this empty heart, it's not able to guide our gut. And because of that, the gut is taking over. And so you guys probably heard of stress eating, and then there's stress not eating, right? Those are based on constitution of people. And even in Chinese medicine, what we do is we see whether or not, if you're skinny, we ask you, are you eating because you're hungry, or are you eating because you have to? The liver attacks either the spleen that makes us eat, and so we stress eat. And then we when the liver attacks the stomach, and there's heat, we have to actually eat to quell that heat in the stomach. So we overeat. That's called stress eating.
Yeah.
So people are like that. And then you've seen the opposite, where people who don't eat at all. And you see, hey, you're working, but you're not eating. You're not adding food to replenish your body. And so this is where you get the adrenal fatigue. And that's the liver attacking the spleen, right? The spleen helps digest food. The stomach burns food. So one is overeating and one is undereating. And that's where we get the deficiency in excess, because the stress itself is causing that response.
Wow. And that's it goes back to the whole, I say yin and yang, yin yang, whatever you want to say, however you want to say it.
Yeah.
And then balance, right? I see it as that people are too yang. That's how I see it. I don't know if you've had the similar experience, but in the United States, I think we're too yang to the point that we are forced to go back to being yin to cool off.
Yes. And one thing that's really important is we have both yin and yang, right? And in our tradition, yang is the active force, the fire that makes us move. Yin is actually the liquids that we store, right? So blood is a liquid we store. So if we lose blood, we die. If we lose fluids, like our saliva, our tears, we die, right? Dehydration. So that's yin. That means that you always have yin inside of you. So like you're saying, when we talk about the yang, actually, if you were to translate that to a Western concept, it'd be masculine. We are very go-do masculine energy. If you're sitting around doing nothing, you're considered lazy. So you have to go do something. Masculine energy is represented as how much have that man done to create a positive version of that man. It's masculine. And then today, women too. Women are actually masculine. Yeah. We see more women working and actually seeing symptoms of being too masculine and having the same deficiencies as a masculine man. And so the yin is actually the idea that even when we work out, nobody talks about stretching. Stretching is yin because it allows us to have flexibility on top of our strength. When you have too much strength, you can break your flexibility, causing bone problems, right? And so, yes, yin is what's missing in our culture. And ironically, the ones who are supposed to bring that are the women. And so this is why you saw a huge influx in yoga. You saw a huge influx in sound bath, because these are what women need to heal. So women started to go deeper into that practice because now they could afford to pay for a sound bath. Where before, if we were living in the old days where like the men had the money, then the women could pay for a sound bath because the men might think, hey, that's not useful. But the women feel great after it. That means they are going through their yin experience of healing. And when that happens, then they're actually becoming more feminine. And so what's really happened is with the rise of women exercise being focused on the sound bath, the meditation, the yoga, the stretching, some men have picked it up. And they started to realize that they were getting balanced as well. And so I think in physical activity, men and women both need that. But it's also like, what is it that you're trying to accomplish? Some people, because they overeat, they should be adding more yang energy that makes them use up what they're picking up. Food is yin. So overeating is actually putting in too much yin in your body, too much feminine. We don't call it feminine. We just call it physical matter. Physical matter is feminine. And like fire, you can't touch it. So it's not physical, but you can feel the energy behind it. That's masculine. So the idea is when we exercise, we build up heat. This is why we sweat, right? And that is called masculine energy. versus women is all about sitting down, because when they're sitting down and relaxing, you actually are able to receive information from the divine. And this is where we talk about spirit guides, we talk about your internal voice. They are able to hear their voice because they're not sitting there trying to talk over somebody. They're just listening. So that means they can listen to themselves. Right. We're taught, even today, like if there's an uncommon, a weird silence between two men, somebody will try to overtalk because they're like, hey, we can't have silence, right? And that's because they're not comfortable being in the yin space of listening. Yeah. So... Appreciate your silence.
You're welcome. You mentioned the receiving of the energy, and what popped in my mind was the chakra system. The whole 7 chakra system. If one is blocked, however you want to call it, if one is blocked, does that stop you from receiving the messages from divine or from spirit, whatever you want to call it?
So our whole body is an antenna, and that's why there's 7 chakras. The 3 lower chakras activates the physical body. It goes back to the gut health. The middle chakra allows us to connect to each other. And then the upper 3 connects to higher divine energy. So technically, it's the higher chakras that allows you to hear divine wisdom. The middle chakra allows us to connect to each other. But yet we are the idea of divine energy too. So when we are connecting to each other, we're actually picking up information from each other. So the chakra system is actually, when we talk about electromagnetic frequencies, is the same thing. Electricity goes down to our spine, and that spine is electrical. Once that spine is electrical, that means that you have these magnetic centers. And these magnetic centers actually build this aura around you. So it's when these magnetic centers, the chakras, are low and they're not sending out signals, they're actually not picking up energy from the outside world. So divine energy is always talking to us. The higher vibrations up here, these higher chakras, tend to come from more evolved version of that. However, it doesn't mean that it's not as important as actually receiving information from the heart space. Like when I talk to you, when you talk to me, it's a very important conversation because you as a source God individual is also choosing to be here in physical form with me. So we are having conversations, so we are sharing data. And because of that, that's very important. This is why you have people who say oh, it's hard for me to connect with you because you have your heart closed off. You're not even listening to me and I'm not sending energy to you. And so so it's not to say that because of your 3 chakras, you should only be focused on these 3 chakras and only be able to listen to these higher wisdom. The problem is in a lot of spiritual groups, and this is what we see a lot, is a lot of people love to focus on this top 3 chakras, maybe these 4 chakras of the heart. They don't actually connect to the lower 3. And if you don't connect to the lower 3, you have unhealthy habits. This is where you have people who meditate all the time, but they don't eat healthily. They eat sugar, and then they're overweight. But you're like, I can hear God. Yeah, but what did God tell you to go do this? Why aren't you doing it? Because it requires me to actually do something physical. And this is why we run into actually spiritual people that are ungrounded. We call them ungrounded because they're not able to integrate the information that source above is sharing to us down here. And because of that, source above is not in a physical form. So if they're telling you to connect to your heart, it's not easy because that's a physical thing to connect to your heart, right? And so even if you heard, my guides told me to talk to my heart. Do you know how to do that? No clue. And that's where this whole ungrounded reality is. Even just exercise. When we do pranic healing, we will actually do a meditation, allow spiritual energy to actually come into our bodies. However, when we're done with that, we actually have to shake our joints. We have to move our body because it's almost like the energy is trying to come down, but it gets stuck to your head. It gets stuck in your heart. But the whole body is the vessel. It's the cup to bring spirit into the cup. So if your cup is leaking of energy, or it's blocked because anything under your heart is blocked because you're not taking care of your physical body because you're cardiovascular or your diabetes, then you're not allowing spiritual energy to actually go into your body. And so you're only hearing a 25% of the message. So some people are like, God told me ABC, and you're like, that sounds like you got half the message. And usually that's the case, because the other half is actually to apply this into your life and integrate. So we see a lot of people not integrating spiritual energy into their physical lives, right? And then you have people who are really physical, who work out a lot, and they are spiritual, but maybe they're not getting higher evolved spirituality, but in the form that when you are living your divine purpose, you are still being spiritual, right? So a lot of times, like, it's not like my guides get involved every day. Like, if I'm doing my purpose, my guides are like cheering me on. They have nothing to say. It's when it's like I'm crying because I struggled, because I'm having a really tough time, then kind of give me some advice. Because they're like, hey, we've been watching you. Why are you crying? Why are you doing that? I don't know. You tell me. And then they'll say something. You're like, oh, I didn't think about it that way. But it's not like they're involved that often, because if I am living according to my spiritual guidance of myself, then I'm living my life and I'm integrating into my life. So this is why I think there's a lot of disconnection with people who are in the spiritual group who say they do spirituality, they don't ground the energy. And so it's important why the entire alignment of the chakras allows you to get deeper wisdom of the information you're gathering from either high above, or we are also gods in body. So this is very important to tell people. It's like, you meditating to hear higher wisdom is not conducive to your life if you're only doing that, because we are surrounded by gods and goddesses in form. We are all angels living in form, and so a lot of times talking to each other is just as powerful as if we're sitting for an hour listening to some invisible guide.
No, definitely. And that's why I love having intimate conversations, because for some odd reason it fills me up. Like, I try my best to talk to people and really be there, really hear them, and connect with them as much as I can. It was we were talking about the chakras and how there's a disconnect, right? Spirit and then body. And what that reminded me of was the unfit gurus. You see them, they're giving you spiritual advice, yet they don't look healthy. It's almost like they disown their body. And that, to me, is a turnoff, right? They're no longer here with us. They're someplace else. And so I think that's why it's important not to. Yes, it's good and bad at the same time. Everything has pros and cons, but when someone is trying to lose weight, they look at one specific thing. So food. That's the only thing they focus on. That doesn't work. All right, let's focus on working out.
And they'll throw everything that they learned about food. As soon as that doesn't work, throw it all away. Like, you mean there's no moderation? No, it just doesn't work anymore.
Yeah. And so they'll keep hopping from one category to another.
And they'll follow fads of foods too.
Yes. And that's one specific thing, right? And they think that's the end all be all.
Exactly. For me, it was vegetarianism. I was a vegetarian coming to Houston for 10 years, almost 12 years. But I was starting to have physical issues. I was always cold. I was barely able to lift much, as much as I didn't work out as much, but like, it wasn't comfortable to work out. And then I felt like I wasn't memorizing things. I was studying, so that was very important, right? But I just wasn't memorizing things, because like, the way I was working out was, to me, almost like, how to not lose energy, versus when you look at my constitution, I'm a Leo rising. I'm a fire sign in my body. That means I'm constantly burning energy. And then I'm a type O. Type O, actually, they're considered the hunter-gatherers, so they were the meat eaters. But spiritually, the conversation of meat eating is like, oh, you're picking up other people's energies. Oh, these animals are blah, 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 blah. There's a lot. And then here we are today. People are like, but plants have feelings too. Plants are conscious too. And so my deeper conversation with eating is actually listen to your body and then do the work to clear karma in what you're eating. So even food, even vegetables. Today we have terrible foods because the soil's lost. Like, the soil sucks, so you're eating really crappy, unnutritious vegetables. They are pesticiding the crap out of it. So there's all these chemicals in the food, in the vegetables that we eat. So not only was I not eating meat, I was eating all these crappy vegetables, that were chemically induced and even organic. Who's to say that they're really organic? They're just another title to put more money, but like they could easily not be organic. And so then the conversation is, what can we eat, right? And so this is the deeper conversation where before I eat anything at all, whether it's plants, vegetables, or meats, is I pray to the food. I send them an energetic healing and say, hey, I honor you because you are choosing to come into my karmic space to do the work with me. So really, when I do my work, all the animals I've ever eaten are part of my karma, and they are like full force my cheerleaders. And that's how I see them. I don't see them as these poor animals that got beat up, that got killed, blah, 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 blah. Like there's so many people who go through tough situations. I did. I almost wanted to leave when I was a younger kid, but that strength that I kept going, and I am here today because I'm not afraid to face the pain, because the pain allows us to grow from it. And so to me, everything that I've eaten, I am very aware of what I've eaten, and I've chosen to have them part of my karmic cycle. And it's not to be bad or good. People get lost of like, oh, karma's bad. You can do good karma, y'all. Good karma is just what you put into it. So when I pray over my food and say, thank you for being here with me, and together, let's fucking rock this world together. Dude, I'm pretty sure that no matter how bad the animals had it, in that moment, they're choosing to join my story, and they are part of my story, and together we are actively doing good in the world, right? And so because even the plants, thank you for the plants, because then bees are involved in creating honey. So I thank the bees because they do make honey for us. And so it's very important that we are aware of the energetic matter that we put into our bodies. And if it is negative, convert it. We are our own source creator. That means we can convert. I'm a programmer by trade. I studied in programming before I came to medicine. That means that I understand the concept of programming. So program your food to match your energetics. Sure, I wish there were places where like they love their food, they're praying over their food, and they're cooking their food with love. But like, am I going to starve because there's not enough restaurants that are cooking out of love? No, that's doing disservice for you as a creator who's able to transmute, right? And so it's very important, even when we do the workouts, some might say this is a good workout, but if you're like hating the workout, don't fucking do it. It's stupid. If you're working out and you're crying, you should not be doing that workout. I mean, seriously, this is where I think laughing and having fun working out is way better than sitting there like, oh, I got to work out today. And then you have like this mean face where you're like just miserable. I mean, then that actually isn't helping you, right? So it is important to understand the state of consciousness that we choose to do anything with. Otherwise, we end up absorbing our own negative energy, whether it's through working out, drinking water, or eating.
And that's why I tell people, when it comes to working out, do something that you enjoy. Like if it's not lifting weights, then you can also do body weights. It doesn't have to be body. If you don't like body weights, then you can do roller skating. If you want to do jogging. Like it's just moving your body in the different planes of motion.
Real quick, Cavi, I used to do because I didn't have enough money during college. I love getting people's groceries because like a monk, I would lift my arms as if I was training with the groceries. And so this is to tell you all, everything can be an exercise. When I do my chores, I would do my Tai Chi. When I lift something heavy, I would consider it a workout. A workout doesn't have to be separate of you having to go somewhere to do it, right? Everything can be a workout. Everything can be exercise. It's this idea that take mindfulness to the next level. Everybody loves to talk about mindfulness of like when you're meditating. Mindfulness was to be when you take a piss, when you eat, when you do everything to working out, that should be mindfulness.
Yes. And I think that we've gone too far from this. Like I'm going to give you an example. The phone takes me away from mindfulness. It's just a lot of stimulation creates that for me. I don't know if that happens to you. It's the entertainment that takes me away from it.
Yes, and I would
No.
say, well, so remember, mindfulness is just a state of mental connection.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've I've been in mindfulness practice since I was 10. I actually followed Ted Young Hank was one of my teachers. So at 10 years old, I was learning how to do mindfulness, walking and talking. And then in junior high, I learned something called metacognition. Have you ever heard of this?
No, I haven't.
The ability to think about what you're thinking about. So it's multiple layers. So what am I thinking right now? I'm talking to you. I'm thinking about something, but
Yeah.
why am I even thinking about it? Because a situation would cause me to think about this.
Mm-hmm.
So it's multiple levels of thinking. A lot of it, people call it parallel thinking. And so and then I play video games. So you play a first person game where you are the hands moving, or you're third person when you see the physical body of that person playing, right? That's called first person, third person view. In parallel thinking, I'm able to see my first person view and my third person view at the same time. So when I am driving, first person takes over. I'm thinking about that mindfully, and I'm aware of where I'm going. But then if I turn on music just to like not think about driving, that would be a disassociation. But if I choose to play music or listen to a podcast, that made me think deeper about the third person reality of my body. Because at that point when I'm driving, my first person body, physical body, can't do anything, right? He's just driving. But my third person, myself, who am I as a spirit, has the ability to then do some parallel function. And so I choose mindfulness in a duality, right, where you're using double processors to understand and be conscious of what you're doing. So that's the power of actually is you can fractalize yourself. Now, after the third and fourth, it becomes actually more ADD because then you're no longer having pure focus on it. So it's much harder as you get, more processors going. But it just shows that mindfulness doesn't have to be a full on focus for one thing. I think that this is why, because people say, oh, ADD is a big problem. Actually, people who are ADD have the ability to, what I said, do multi-processing functional abilities. So we have a third function that we can use that most people don't realize we do. It's called subconscious programming. I can tell myself right now, Charlie, I'm struggling with this, my emotion. I don't know why, so please think about it. Then I turn my prefrontal cortex off and say, don't think about that. My emotions are thinking about it. And then I go on with my day. And what I'll do is I'll do something like a run or chores, because all my processing energy is in the chore. And because my body is thinking that, it's not able to think about how I'm feeling. So what happens is the heart is actually processing that. And then so now I'm in probably 30-minute. I usually love running for this reason. I'll do like a 30-minute run, just listening to music with no words, because words cause you to process information. So sometimes I just listen to like old school Chinese kung fu movies or a lot of classical music. And so what happens is after I start running for 30 minutes, the thoughts of my heart comes up, goes, hey, we figured it out. Tell me. So my heart will start speaking to me, saying, this is why you're feeling this way. Do you remember this happened to you, this happened to you, this happened to you? Holy shit, I didn't think about that. That's my subconscious creating a different route to process without my conscious brain taking space. Because my conscious brain is stuck doing chores or something physical. And this is why it's very important to do chores, to do something physical that requires your monkey brain to shut off, because when you're like, oh, I don't know what to do, blah, 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 and you start thinking about all these ideas, that's when your monkey brain is going over the top and not focusing on what is it right now you're doing, which is doing the dishes,
Right.
Cleaning your room, right? And that's why they say like meditation is good even when you're just doing the dishes, because in doing the dishes, you turn off that monkey brain, the mental plane, and you're just focusing on making sure the dishes are clean. And that's when like these deeper thoughts come. So a lot of times people say, yeah, when I like take a shower in the shower, and then I get these great ideas, that's your subconscious coming up and giving you ideas. So you can actually actively work with it by saying, hey, I need you to think about this, subconscious, because I'm really upset about this. And then turn it off, clean yourself, do the dishes, and then it will come up. So that's another way of how I use the multi-dimensional aspect of our consciousness, because consciousness is not just in the brain. Our heart has a consciousness, our gut has a consciousness, right? So that's why this idea of super consciousness, unconsciousness, and regular consciousness.
Do you think we already have all the answers?
Yes. Yes, we always have all the answers. The problem is, like you said, we are distracted from the physical stuff, because the answers are all from within, right? It's really you from within that's trying to do anything in the physical world, right? And because of that, a lot of times what goes into our mind is what people say we cannot do. It's a really weird thing that we have grown up, and that could be from Stockholm syndrome of like, you can't do this, you can't do this. You grew up being told you cannot do something, versus when you see an adult who's actually living as if like no one tells them what to do. That's because they were able to grow up without a lot of restrictions. Now that can be bad in some way, because then you have the spoiled children problem, right? Where they've never experienced hardship, so they are willing to do anything, but they don't do the hard work, because as soon as they hit hard work, they think, oh, it's not for me, right? So again, balance of that experience.
Yeah, the balance of energies, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And how there's energy in different formats. In Chinese medicine, we call it qi, but then there's what I call chest qi, which is our prana from our breathing. We get, all of our different organs have qi, which is what I call electricity. For the organs to run, just like your computer is getting electricity, and all the different parts, the CPU, the RAM, all the different parts are getting electricity. That's called qi, right? Like your car. As soon as the battery is sending electricity to all the parts of the car, but if something doesn't get electricity, it stops working. Like your radio stops working. You're not going to go, my car's broken. No, your radio is broken because it's not getting electricity. Same thing happens in our body. When the lungs have less qi, less electricity, it's not able to breathe. So then you have all the problem of coughing, asthma, and all the coughing issues. So we look at those symptoms and say, hey, you're having a problem with not just your lungs, but maybe something is not sending electricity to your lungs.
I used to have asthma.
Yeah.
And as soon as I started eating like high quality organic food, for some odd reason, it started to go away, like that asthma effect. I was also overweight too, but it helped a lot whenever I switched my food. And I know they even talked about how pasteurized milk can cause asthma. What is it? Peanut butter can cause asthma.
Yeah, so a lot of it is it creates mucus. It's really the fundamental problem, is that some of these foods that we eat creates mucus, and that mucus goes into your lungs, and that's what causes this asthma feeling that your lungs are filled with fluids, and that's why you kind of need to cough and cough, trying to get it out. That's why actually you probably heard today people drink lemon with their water. Lemon will break down the mucus. So for me, I used to smoke. I used to smoke, not regular cigarettes, but I used to smoke a lot of cannabis. I'm from LA, right? And so I would drink a lot of water in the morning, and what would happen is all the mucus would come up, and I would cough it out, and I would get all the gunk that was building up in my lungs. So lemon water in the morning, warm water with lemon is really amazing for clearing the lungs. Yeah.
If only I knew.
Well, the thing is, you're better off now because you're not eating any of that gunk that's actually causing the problems to your lungs.
And do you think we have a lot of that?
So much. Cheese is a big one. I'm a big cheese fan, but I've learned to also how to cut back. Sugar, I'm a big sugar fan, but this is why I've learned to eat fruits, because fruits are much better sugars. It's natural sugars. Natural sugars can break down more quickly than fructose, high corn fructose. I mean, that stuff is the bane of our bodies.
Yeah.
It will cause so many issues. I think cancer, a lot of cancers are based on some of these chemicals, whether it's sugars, some of the chemicals in our food, but also if we want to talk about cancer and trigger people, I think the number one issue of cancer is mental negative attacks towards yourself. Masaru Emoto proved this when he said that water retains memory.
It does,
emotional memory. And so he showed how when you say I love you to water and rice, it creates wine, right? Rice wine, which is beautiful. And then when you say negative things to the water and rice, it creates mold. Do you know what mold looks like on that x-ray?
Black?
Like cancer. Yeah.
Wow.
So if you notice how people have said now, this use the word black mold in your body,
Yeah.
it's like saying cancer.
Jeez.
And so if you pay attention, though, where does the cancer come from? And this is where now we can go into the emotions and body, psychosomatic. You've heard of psychosomatic?
Yeah.
So the idea that psychosomatic is your emotions, your consciousness is what affects your body. So you'll pay attention is people who get breast cancer, for say, usually it's for women who have small breasts. Because in this culture, the problem is we like big breasts.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't have big breasts, you're looked down, right? And so because of that, women who have small breasts would actually feel really terrible for their breasts, causing cancer because they feel negatively towards their breast.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with men. What do we have? Testicular and penis problems. Why? Because we love bigger is better in this country. So, and ironically, I am an Asian American, so I get the small end of that story, right? Compared to like the black people who I'm sure have no testicular cancer, but like I'm sure a lot more Asians did, right? So it goes back to this idea that if you don't love your body will just cause these black mold, cause cancer. And that's why in the West, they are terrible with dealing with cancer because they think it's a physical problem. And they won't even ask their therapist to corroborate the issues with cancer. Right? And so if we did, we would actually realize that cancer, like we were talking about, is an energetic form of our emotions causing it to go into our bodies, attacking our bodies. This is why it's important to have, the Buddhists used to practice this in the Tibetans, that for many years, it's like 10 years, you cannot have one single negative thought towards yourself.
Oh, wow.
Because if you did, you would cause a negative reaction in your body. That's why we have unhealthy. That's why today in Western medicine, you notice no one talks about how you should have therapy when you have a disease. But if you did, some of your disease would go away because it's psychosomatic.
Yeah.
Actually, when I do massages with people and I work with people who are intuitive, who will actually pick up the imagery that they get when they go through. Like when I massage and it's really painful, I'll go really slowly. What will happen is people will get visions of what caused that blockage. And so I've had people tell me, "Oh, Charlie, thank you for rubbing out my back. This knot comes from last week when I did A, B, C, D, E, F, G." I was like, "Wow, that's very specific. How did you know this?" It came in my mind when you were massaging that part. I'm like, holy crap. So I started to know that. So I started to actually test that a lot more. Like a scientist, I went into practicing, trying to see if I could replicate this thing. Where every time I massage a knot, I would ask people who were intuitive, who were willing to share with me what they went through. Did you happen to notice what came through when I was massaging this knot? You go, yes, actually, they would tell me. It's like, do you know how to deal with that now? It's like, no. If you deal with it now, maybe that pain won't come back. So sometimes they do deal with it and it doesn't come back. Sometimes it's much harder than just dealing with it, right? I think it does come back. But it just to show that the fascial layer is a liquid crystal, and that's what the spiritual energy will embody and attach itself to. So I do believe that our spiritual energy, this amorphous blob, and then it like tries to wrap around our bodies, and it latches onto the fascial layer, and that's why the fascia is very important in massage. That's why now suddenly everyone's talking about fascia release. Yeah, because that's just emotional release using the fascia, which is spiritually in nature.
Yeah, that makes sense, man. I know we carry traumas in our bodies. And when there's like a tight muscle, right? Like for instance, stress. We always hear that people have stress in their traps, right? Their trapezius muscles. Right? And they probably ask you, this a lot. You're like, I need this part of my neck to be released. I don't know if if the stress always loads on that area the most, but I always hear that, always. And I think there's some people that are more sensitive to that it's literally loaded on their traps. And so whenever we're doing workouts, their traps always gets involved, no matter what. And so I had to work around this by doing, so I'm gonna give an example. If we're doing a shoulder raise, no matter what, their traps will always want to get involved. So what I ended up doing is I ended up grabbing their traps and I just push it down, and then they're doing their lateral raises. And that's my way to stop it from happening. And of course, I'll suggest massage therapy to release that trap.
Yeah. You ever heard of people carrying the weight on their shoulders?
Yes, I heard.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a very common problem. It goes around with shame and guilt that this country loves to give people. Shame and guilt. And because of shame and guilt, and for some reason, a lot of people, in general, humans are very willing to help each other. And so a lot of times what happened is we carry the weight of the world on our shoulders because we believe that we have a responsibility to give back to the world we're in. And so a lot of times that energy carries into their shoulders, which is their traps. Now the traps are also really big. So because of that, they tend to be an overwhelming muscle, right? If you see them, they're connected to so many parts of our back. The second piece is this. People are on their screens a lot, and what happens is they are always activating or not activating their traps. So that's why I think a lot of people are so used to like not using their traps correctly. So I think there's multiple reasons for that. And I think in general, there's always multiple reasons. Sometimes there is a physical thing that happens, an overuse, underuse. And I think our phone has caused a lot of neck issues. So those aren't necessarily psychosomatic. However, and because of that, like it's hard to kind of prove that some of these back issues are coming from like an emotional thing versus like to me, hip problems are very common problems today. Now, I do think that's because we're sitting down a lot, right? However, as we get older, hips is your lower chakras. The first and second chakras for sure, right? We have sexual problems in this country. And it's the things that I got my doctorate because I studied erectile dysfunction for men. And the reason why is because I do think that our culture right now is attacking men so much that we're both having a psychosomatic experience of performance anxiety, right? Bigger is better, to the point where it's like people just talk about like having a big dick is the only thing to have sex. Like that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, right? But that's, why they overdo that. And so that's why you have a huge place of erectile dysfunction. But the other piece is diabetes and cardiovascular. Right, so we are now sitting down all day long. Yeah. So what's happening is actually our tailbone is underneath. Yeah. We're acting like we're basically we're supposed to be standing tall with our tailbone out as if we're like a very confident being. But when we sit down, we actually tend to contract everything. So what happened is all the muscles are actually closing up so that you're not able to have an erection. And so this is, again, a deeper problem of our men in general is we have a lot of diabetes now in this country. We have a lot of cardiovascular issues. That jab that everyone took was definitely not good because it caused a lot of blood stagnation. So blood stagnation is a problem. So this is why, like a lot of times, so when I did my research, sure, there's acupuncture points to have an erection. The problem, though, is the amount of ED that's now shown up in this country is both unreported because most men are not reporting this. Second, no one is asking men if they're having an ED issue, right? Some of them are more willing to say it, but most people are not willing to say it because they'll think they will be looked at. Yeah. And ironically, even when you talk to women, like most women don't look at it like, oh, that sucks. They usually laugh about it as if it's like, oh, that sucks for you. Like, yeah, but if you're my wife, it sucks for you double. Right, and you don't get actually a lot of the feminine energy being supportive of that, and then again, if you're having children, men are 50% of the conversation, and guess who doesn't show up in fertility clinics? Men. So the reason I went, and this was also a spiritual thing, I didn't know what I was going to write my capstone about for my doctorate degree. And I was like, Spirit, if you know what I'm supposed to write about, show up. And a weird situation happened. The irony about where people are with the gays. We had a gay couple that I had a friend, and that came up where like, Charlie, would you consider donating your sperm to a gay couple? And I was like, well, that's a new one. I've never been asked that. And that spurned my conversation of, at the time I'm not married. I'm still not married. I've never had kids. And so whether or not I am fertile or not, I don't know. I don't think I am not fertile. But I've never tested it because I haven't really looked into having children. So when they're like, would you donate your sperm? I'm like, it put me into the space of, am I fertile enough to donate sperm? And so I was like, okay, let's look at this, because it was out of nowhere. And I was like, and at the time I wasn't thinking it was going to be my capstone. But all these situations, even one of the doctors we were talking to, he goes, hey, if any of you guys are willing to go into erectile dysfunction, it's going to be a huge business in the coming years because a lot of men have issues.
Yeah.
And so I was hearing all these little anecdotes about men, infertility, and erectile dysfunction. And then like all my friends and everybody's talking about IVF. I was at a clinic and they talked about IVF and how like, their husband won't coming to the doctor, so they don't know if their husband is fertile. And I was like, wow, why are everyone talking about erectile dysfunction around me? So I said, what if I go into fertility for men, or at least erectile dysfunction? Because no one, and then there's a list of like what other doctors have written their capstone on. And on that list, not a single one talks about erectile dysfunction. So I was like, okay, let me see if because usually when you start to choose something that spirit wants you to follow, the synchronicity will stop as soon as you choose the path. So I said, okay, I'm going to choose erectile dysfunction as my capstone. And then I started to announce it to my friends, right, to other doctors in my school. And as soon as I started to joke around, and ironically, it's sad and funny at the same time because all the dick jokes came out. Everybody loved dick jokes. And so I would laugh, but I go, because everyone's trying to make logos for me, right? And so you see all these like funny logo jokes to the point where actually when one of the projects we were supposed to show up, we were making a fake clinic. So I was like, my clinic is about erectile dysfunction, just to play around. But then like all my friends sent me really funny dick jokes, and that came up, and that like was really funny. And as soon as that happened, I mean, the whole experience of the gay couple that wanted sperm never showed up. Like they didn't ask. They were not even interested. It just came up. It wasn't like they were really serious about it. But in the moment that it happened, it made me go deeper into, am I fertile?
Yeah.
And so even spirit was like trying to guide me that like, hey, you should look into this because this is what you could serve the community of men. And for me, like, I don't have a huge community of men and men's circles. And I think today there's a few of those circles, and they tend to be in the spiritual groups. But I think men have not been supported. I don't think that men go to therapy. I think we think that working out is therapy, which is therapy in some sense. But this is where I think it's very important that we should go deeper into helping men, right? And that's why, to me, spiritually, it guided me to go into helping men. And so when that happened, as much as I joked about it, I was like, guys, I am serious about this. Like, I think there are a lot of men who do not have support, and they'll never tell anyone. So I have to actually make it funny and out there, because I also start to go, are people going to judge me whether I have it? Because usually people say, what you're studying in your capstone is what you might be having an issue with. So I have to sometimes, almost defended myself, and I realized I don't have to. I don't have to. If I'm helping a couple of guys, that's good enough for me. I don't have to prove to myself. I don't have kids. I'm not trying to have kids. So at this point, if I ever get erectile dysfunction, I at least know how to take care of myself. But until that would happen, I would be here serving and supporting men. So that's where now, as much as there's so much I can do in acupuncture, so much I can have an audience in acupuncture, and that's why I'm excited to be here with you. It's like the conversation of men is important. I think we should not be working out so we look good, but actually we feel good. We can have great sex with our women and have children. And that's actually the deeper conversation, and why I think the motivation of health for men should be different than just, I want to look buff and tough so I can have girls. Because I think this is a common misnomer about exercise and health. You're like, well, I don't need six pack. I'm not asking you to, but that spare tire you have is causing your ED, right? So let's cut that, spare tire out. You can have a 1-pack. I don't care. At least have some pack, right? So that you're not, having all these issues. So, yeah.
That's diving deep, man. I don't even know if I'm one of those. And I think men don't necessarily talk about those things. There's certain things that we talk about, and there's certain things that we don't.
We can still see in the gym. Hey, bro, how you doing, man? How's that sperm count? Oh, it's still working. My sperm count's up, yo.
Yeah, we don't do that. Yeah, we don't even do that. And even with what they call it, locker room talk.
Yeah.
It's always about shit, like shit that doesn't really matter.
I mean, if anything, we never really talk about anything deep.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, why men's circles are needed, because there are deep conversation we need to have. And sometimes we don't need a therapist for everything. I think as other men, we're really good at like, I've tried this. Have you tried that? Versus like women are so good at doing that. But like men, like we're not supporting each other, and we can't expect the women to support us. That's not their space to, right? I think it's important that we as men support each other. We are, like, men are bred for war. Women will not. And because of that, we need to know that war may not be a physical war where we have to go and kill people. Actually, war is whether we can make enough money to support our family. That is the battle that we have as men, that we are healthy enough to support our families, right? To protect our families. And in today's lifestyle, we've forgotten that if the battlefield is no longer, shooting up guns, trying to take over a country, but it is protecting your family, we are definitely failing at that, right? And so that's very important that we as men support each other, because we're supporting ourselves as fathers and as husbands to support the family so that our community survives, right? And so that's been a very deeper conversation and motivation for health. I think you probably experienced this too. A lot of men don't want to pay for exercise, right? I'm working on the field all day long. I tell people working on stress doesn't actually support your body. You actually need time to do work on your body and train, but you're actually tuning out of your mind. Because a lot of times I know people who work, the farms or whatever, where they're constantly stressed moving around, right? Like let's say Amazon, delivering packages and you're moving around. That is not exercise. That is not physical training. You're actually moving around during a stressful experience. So yes, your body and blood might move, but you're not experiencing higher states of testosterone building. You're not experiencing higher state of being able to handle stress through your physical body, right? And so because of that, I tell men who are in these like physical labor job, like, are you running for yourself? Because running for yourself means you are trying to be a better husband and father, and that's, I think, is lost on our generation today.
Well said, my friend. Well said. I don't know what time it is.
We're definitely over, I'm sure.
Yes.
Not too bad. 1:13, yeah.
1:13. It's going to be a lot of editing. A lot of editing. It's been a while since we've talked. Like I said in the beginning, the reason I wanted you here is because you have this unique take. So thank you for sharing that with us. And these are things that I get to look within and start practicing. So thank you for that reminder.
Great. Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, that's very important, to go within and practice your own.
Yeah. Well, thank you, everyone, for showing up. Oh, before we leave, is there anything you want to let the audience know, like something like a workshop that you're having, or maybe any services that you provide?
Yeah, so I am on YouTube. I've started a channel called The Self-Healing Journey. So it's actually my own journey, but other people. And I'd love to interview you for your own journey. But it's all about tuning into ourselves, right? And we've had this deeper conversation today about talking to our spirits, our divine self, higher self, inner voice. But we already know, like I said, all the answers. So what is it that is your self-healing journey? Because even as a doctor, I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm only guiding you to help you in your own healing journey, because like you said, there's so many different modalities. So I'm on YouTube as Dr. Charlie Trin, Self-Healing Journey. You can find me on Instagram and all the other social media platforms, but I do astrology classes to teach you more about your spiritual journey here. And because your spiritual journey will actually also inform us of why your body is built the way it is. And so if you are talking about, should I do more running, more lifting, or drink more water or less water, your body and constitution is based on your spiritual mission. So if your spiritual mission is to do marathons, then your body is built for that, right? And so we will talk about how to actually eat properly, work out properly, do the right yin exercises to support that process. And then astrology, and then we do pranic healing. There's a lot of pranic healers out here today, but definitely connect with me on social media. I'm sure you'll put my info on the description below, and then find me there. And I'm doing a round of podcasts everywhere, really talking about the mind, body, spirit, the medicalizing it, and then really supporting men's health and supporting each other as men, because together, when men support each other, we'll be able to support the feminine as a whole. But right now, we need to also show up as men in camaraderie and community.
Amen.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you on the next. Namaste. Cool.
Nice.
That was awesome, dude. That was awesome.
Thank you.
You got a lot to say, man.
I do.
Holy moly.
I've been at it for a while, but this is where I needed to find my own niche, right?
Yeah.